Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. That was from Right Wing Mandela's new radio program, interview with Andy Kindler. Brianna actually wrote the script for that, so thank you. I appreciate that.
Anytime.
Joining us now is Brianna Joy Gray. She is a writer, analyst, host of what's the name of your podcast again?
Someone's Wrong on the Internet, SWOTY.
SWOTY, Someone's Wrong on the Internet. That's true. I like how you named your podcast after a truism.
Yeah.
She's going to be hanging out with us through the rest of the public show and into the post game. But we have to start with a piece that you wrote for Current Affairs called How Identity Became a Weapon Against the Left. Make the case. I mean, this is a very receptive place to make the case, but you outlined it, I think, in a way, to sort of set the table a little bit. I think that in some ways there's a lot of things that get conflated in this debate. There's actually a high-level debate that I think, if it was actually taking place, would be a really worthwhile one, which is kind of like a Marxist versus intersectional debate. Mm-hmm. And what do we center and what do we value and how do we synthesize? And then I think there's an emotional intelligence debate. There's some people that I totally agree with analytically, but the way they talk and the way they address certain issues, it's like, whoa,
yeah, sure.
you're absolutely just not communicating with awareness, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's like a tremendous amount of political opportunism and cynicism. And I think that you hit these threads really well. So why don't you outline the piece and we'll break it down and move from there.
So basically, I felt compelled to write this or some version of it since the months leading up to the election, where I was met with a lot of incredulity every time that someone became aware that I was in fact a black leftist.
Right.
And this often happens on Twitter, where despite one's avatar, it's easier for people to make presumptions about who you are or who you aren't. And so what you would find is that you would get into ideological disagreements with people, and they would pull I don't want to trivialize it by saying this, but like they would pull a kind of a version of a race card on me. Mm-hmm. It would usually be a white centrist who would tell me, you could only have those views if you were a privileged white Bernie bro. You must be a 19-year-old living in your mother's basement, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
To which I would say, check out my avatar. And the response I found troublingly was often that they would completely back down. And it would confuse me because my position was I'm right because I'm right, not because I'm not white. So there's this complete and total marriage of political opinion, or how much credit you get, how much credibility you have politically with your identity, which even when it benefits me, troubles me greatly, especially as someone who, just as an individual, as a human being, whose identity doesn't always match with, racial expectations, and that's a freedom that, white people have,
right.
and that other people of color often don't. And it's been kind of exacerbated in this political arena where there's a lot of political gain to be had by leading with identity, which has the effect at times of marginalizing economic arguments. And as someone who is a strong believer in some of the economic arguments that were raised by Sanders with a prominence that we haven't seen in a long time, it was particularly disheartening to see members of my community being swayed by arguments that weaponize their own identity against them.
Right. So, and we'll get to the sort of specific political examples of that, because I think that, the other thing that it also reveals is that the comfort in at least our circles, roughly speaking, which are coastal, educational, broadly, I think one of the things that's actually great now is we really are seeing that, like, we don't have the same politics. There's radically different politics within what people generically call the left. I actually encounter that when I go and do media with, say center-right or centrist people, and they expect me to come with this whole kind of agenda, which I actually probably I agree with, but they expect a whole mode of discourse and way of framing the world, which I don't. Mm-hmm. And because they've that sort of broader brand of what the left has been so distorted. But there are kind of the two specific examples of how these arguments got deployed. And let's start with just the real nitty-gritty of the cynicism before we get to some of the actual merits on both sides, right? So it was amazing. And, we're probably like roughly-ish the same age. So we didn't exactly like, I mean, we were alive during Bill Clinton, but we probably were not like, super up on it.
I wasn't in the country for any of the Clinton years.
Oh, wow. Were you
Yeah.
so repulsed by Bill Clinton? You're out of the country?
Talked to my mom about
Yeah,
it.
wow. Okay, got you. Actually, where were you?
We were in Saudi Arabia from.
Well, that explains it. There you go. See, this is another part of the Islamic Marxist conspiracy. I'm had again. All Sam Harris trolls hit us up. You know what it is. You know how hard it is? Like, the commitment that we have to wage jihad, that you're not in a burqa right now, is like amazing.
I
Yeah.
brought it with me if you want me to do a quick change.
Well, no, not while we're
less
on the air, because we
offensive
got to
to
keep.
your-
Well, it is, but I understand that we're doing deep cover work, so of course, no, I appreciate it. I mean, obviously, once we leave, and I will get appropriately attired as well. But but we know that Bill. The irony is that the Clinton, the first third way kind of DLC model that the Clintons operate out of, which was exemplified in Bill Clinton in '92. Actually relatively center lefty on economics when he first ran for president. Not as bad on those issues. Terrible on exploiting racial divisions, making sure people need to look up Ricky Ray Rector. He went while he was running for president and signed the death warrant of a literally mentally lobotomized black man, a guy who, before he was executed, asked what his next meal would be, or rather, he wanted to save some of his final meal for later, right? This was before he was going to get executed.
Right.
This is Bill Clinton. And then in 1996, to the right on the economy, and then incredibly socially reactionary politics as designed by Dick Morris. And then, so that's, and Hillary Clinton was totally on board for that. So and then in 2008, all sorts of bizarre, I mean, there's no doubt that rumors about Obama's heritage and stuff like that had roles in the Clintons' campaign.
Somali garb.
Yeah, well, and that's what I will be changing into. So, it was extraordinary with just a tiny sense of political awareness to watch that the Clinton campaign's response to Bernie Sanders' unexpected success was going to be, we are woke. And I knew people on the political spectrum. I knew I was well to their left, but I also was like, they're sophisticated enough that they cannot possibly fall for this, because this is also like, this is somebody who came out for marriage equality 2 years ago,
Right.
and this is ridiculous. And then all of a sudden, that's what it was. So, get more. And then that leads us to the discourse around Kamala Harris.
Right. So that was the proximate cause of writing this article.
Right.
Because I have felt in the court, like particularly, I feel like irritated by the optimism surrounding her. Partly because I kind of run in a lawyery, liberally, lawyers of color circle that is particularly enthusiastic about her.
Right.
I
About
went
Kamala
to,
Harris.
Yes.
Yeah.
I went to law school with her niece. I mean, she's been a name that's been in my life for a very long time for other reasons. And what was particularly troubling was that my instinct was to root for her, right? And I hope that comes across in some small way in the article, that I wasn't here to just completely drag her,
Right.
But when we've just come off of an election like we've had, and we see the Democratic Party lining up behind someone who has so many of the similar failings that ended up tanking Hillary Clinton, when you have someone in a social climate where Black Lives Matter is potentially the most, visible and kind of easily identified movement on the left, to have someone who's a former prosecutor, who spent her career bragging about how many people she can put behind bars, who specifically advocated particular policies that are especially draconian in nature, the criminalization of parents with truant kids. I mean, this is the kind of person that we're supposed to all rally behind without even a moment of pause. And what I would hope is that an article like this and criticism of her would lead to her self-evaluating and making some attempt to pivot, do what she can do to try to reevaluate who she is. Because I feel like a lot of politicians in this kind of new Bernie world, where it seems you can maybe do it without all the fundraising, maybe you can do it without all of the political compromises that we thought were a matter of course, might make different decisions and might be able to find some integrity buried deep down somewhere. But instead, any criticism is taken as you're racist or you're a sexist, because that is the line that Hillary Clinton really formalized and really specialized in. And that's the mindset that people can't seem to shake.
It was epitomized. And I want to get, because I really like, because I've been sort of trying to thread this needle, because I don't think it's productive for people on our side to, I think we should have the confidence to be able to come out and say to somebody like Kamala Harris, who is an appealing political figure in some ways, like, look, we have the blueprint for you. Mm-hmm. Work with us. We should have the, not be out with this sort of immediate, like, well, fuck her and all of it. I think that's where, people on our side of the equation can get insular and dogmatic, mm-hmm. which when it comes to electoral politics is just not how you operate. I mean, if I operated like that, I have, Bernie says things about Israel that annoy me. You know what I mean? Like, we can all play this game, right? I'm not saying an equivalency. Bernie is way more progressive than Kamala Harris, but you know what I'm saying. But I think, just to really underscore, I think one of the moments where the dynamic you're talking about really came alive and was really the formalization of this split was in one of the Democratic debates where Hillary Clinton, in response to, and Bernie's up there working his arms and like, we got to do something on Wall Street, and, oh man, that fucks my shoulders up, even doing that impression. Oof, I got to do some yoga. Maybe he needs to do some yoga. But, he was doing it, and he was doing his great spiel. And everybody knows, I mean, Wall Street and, those are those like 70, 80% issues. And obviously Donald Trump was able to get some traction on a scam version of telling that same story.
Right.
And she looked back at him and she said, solving Wall Street won't get rid of racism.
Right.
And that was an applause line. And I mean, the multitude of how shockingly stupid and disingenuous that was, it literally took my breath away. Because, first, we start with the obvious, which is that Wall Street running amok has incredibly specific implications for people of color, which I would love for you to elaborate. But then second, it was like, that's the new, like, what is she going to say? Like, I'm not going to sign a new SALT treaty. That won't solve racism. Like, what the fuck? Like, it was, because that to me is the kind of broader thing that also shows up with Kamala Harris. There's this bizarre, like, if Kamala Harris becomes my token of emotional political redemption, that also becomes this extraordinarily bizarre racialized discourse in and of itself. And even there, you're basically saying, like, hey, people of color can't have any policy sets on anything, including, by the way, in that instance, one that does have a disproportionate effect on people of color. But that would be like, why do arms control?
Yeah.
Why sign a new, whatever. Yeah.
Someone on the internet tweeted at me once, you're concerned with economic equality? That's so privileged. It's something that, only a white person would have to deal with.
Can you repeat that again?
I shit you not. Like, economic equality is such a white privileged thing to care about.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
So, yeah, as you've pointed out, first of all, the Wall Street failures disproportionately affected the black community. I think it stole something like 40% of black wealth. Yeah. And black wealth
through
is
home
already...
ownership.
And we're already something like a nickel to a dollar of white family wealth. So you really can't overstate that direct harm. Secondly, as you said, it's like this incredible logical fallacy that curing racism not only should that not be a metric for pursuing any kind of policy, but it's not as though the Democrats are offering any alternative that will cure racism. I've yet to see the DNC's 2020 platform for eliminating all discrimination.
Right. Well, that was the other thing that I wanted you to touch on, and I guess it's emotionally lethargic to relitigate some of this stuff. But I remember when and reparations, like, That's just literally, well, I mean, it's not a conversation we're having now. We can have it. That's fine. But the thing that struck me when Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote his critique of Bernie, which I mean, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't overly impressed with it. I thought he had a totally valid point. Maybe I'm enough of a political operative to be like, okay, that's an interesting time to intervene in this primary.
Mm-hmm.
But what really got me was like, when you're going to deploy, and just to be clear, Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote a column saying Bernie doesn't want to touch reparations because he doesn't think it's politically viable, but every other part of his political message is on challenging what is politically viable. And the one thing I will say operationally is that, I mean, Ta-Nehisi Coates is totally right on the merits of what he's saying in terms of the actual argumentation, but I think what Bernie is saying in a kind of more operational sense is expand what is politically viable in terms of issues that you can get 70, 80% of the American population on. And whether we agree with that approach or not, that is what he's talking about.
Right.
He's not talking about finding more, he's talking about what's an issue set, like everybody has health care, Wall Street stops robbing you of your home,
Yeah.
that pretty much everybody who isn't doing the robbing can agree with. But anyways, what struck me was that it's a fine critique, but watching Hillary Clinton's people post, I was like, I didn't see the Marcus Garvey section of Hillary Clinton's campaign website. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Hi, folks. Sam Cedar here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos